Pakistan Society of Internal Medicine, I welcome you all to this 2 days activity on the occasion of World Hypertension Day. You all know that World Hypertension Day is celebrated every year on 17th of May. And this is a day to remind all of us about this silent killer, which is the leading cause of death world over. Today, we are going to start our program with recitation of Holy Quran. Today's webinar is the first series of this event, and we have two very esteemed speakers with us, Professor Azizur Rahman and Professor Amir Shaukat. So may I request, please, Professor Azizur Rahman to start his talk, and he will be talking about the hypertension management with you all today. Professor Azizur Rahman.
Thank you, Soumya, for a very kind introduction. And very, very heartened to know that I think more than 300 people have already joined, 337. So very, very good start of the activity. And I would be a little nervous in the presence of Professor Ajaz Vora. But I also feel very, very encouraged that he will correct me if I'm wrong at some way. So today's seminar is this, my part at least, is going to be very, very interactive. And throughout the presentation, I'll be asking for the input of the attendees. So I request all the attendees to remain active and alert. Your input would be required in the form of polls. And polls is not actually a test. We are not testing anybody's knowledge. It will be actually anonymous. So you can respond in whatever form you want to, but we would like to know what people think in a given situation so that we can develop a consensus. So we are going to start this presentation. I think I should take not more than 45 minutes because it's a slow and interactive, so it's going to take about 45 minutes or so. So the topic is treatment of hypertension and real life case scenarios. So I have fabricated some cases which would reflect real life cases which you see every day, and you have to make a judgment according to that particular case. So every case has an age, has a comorbid condition. So please respond according to that particular patient. So my agenda is first few introductory slides about hypertension, since I am the first one in the series. So I would give some introduction to hypertension, and then case scenario management in the light of NICE guidelines. You know, there are a number of guidelines available. So I'll be following NICE guidelines in this presentation, and then as highlighted in various guidelines, the role of a double and triple combination, and then finally I'll give you a summary. So this is the world map, and you can see the prevalence of hypertension may range from like 15% to 25%, depending upon the survey, depending upon the area, and also depending upon the cut points. Now, if you use the new cut points given by American Heart Association, then I think the prevalence may actually be much higher, maybe close to 50% in some populations. But we know that in Pakistan, prevalence of hypertension is about 19%, according to one survey which was published in Journal of Pakistan Medical Association, and 19% of all people above 15 and 33% in people above 45. And many have additional atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease risk factors, because hypertension in itself is a risk factor for coronary artery disease and CVS. But if you have additional risk factors like diabetes or dyslipidemia, then the risk is actually multiplied. And one estimate says that annual incidence of stroke in Pakistan is more than 350,000. And one major contributor to this is uncontrolled hypertension. And this is my favorite slide. You know, cardiovascular mortality risk doubled with each 20 by 10 millimeter of mercury increment in blood pressure. Now, this is the cut point, and this corresponds to the traditionally accepted cut point of 140 by 90. Now, obviously, it is understandable if you go this way, the risk increases. So every 20 by 10 increment would double the risk of cardiovascular. Cardiovascular complications include stroke, renal failure, and heart attack and heart failure. So with every 20 by 10 millimeter rise, of course, the risk doubles. So of course, it is a gradual increment. But good thing is that if we reduce, sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, all right. So if we bring the blood pressure back to normal, the reduce is halved. From this point, it is halved. So that means if we can control the blood pressure, we can reduce the risk also. Now, even more interesting is that if you bring it further down to the normal range, now look at this one, 135 by 85, this is an ideal blood pressure. So if you bring it further down to like 115 by 75%, 75 millimeter mercury, the risk is further reduced. But of course, this might cause some symptoms of hypotension. So I think the recommendation is that if you are treating somebody, bring it back to 140 by 90. That is the minimum requirement, but try to bring it further down if patient can tolerate the side effects of antihypertensive medication. So within the certain range, lower the better, because it brings down the cardiovascular disease. Now, this is another very interesting slide, benefit of blood pressure lowering, meta-analysis of 61 studies consisting of 1 million adults and extended over 12.7 years. And that has shown that just 2 millimeters of mercury reduction in systolic blood pressure can reduce ischemic heart disease related mortality up to 7%. And similarly, in fact, and more importantly, it can reduce the CVA related mortality by 10%. So just 2 millimeters of mercury reduction brings down CVS, CVA, and IHD related mortality by 7 to 10%. And now you can imagine in our real life, patient have blood pressure 180, 190 by 110. So there's a lot of opportunity, lot of scope, lot of possibility of bringing down their cardiovascular and cerebral mortality very, very substantially. Now, these are the guidelines which are available. NICE, the British Society of Hypertension guidelines, and JNC8 is also available. European Society of Hypertension and European Society of Cardiology guidelines are also available. American College of Cardiology and American Heart Association and International Society of Hypertension guidelines are available. And this one is the latest, but I'm going to talk about the NICE one. And the NICE one also were updated in 2019. So this is the latest version which I'm going to be referring to. Now, this is the training poll, because we are going to run polls. So I don't want any confusion or any unnecessary delay during the actual poll. So this is the training poll, and I would like every participant, even if you are chair or co-chair or panelist, I would like everyone to poll in this. So let's just to make sure that the system is working. Please poll. I just realized that host and panelists cannot poll, the others should poll. Please show me the results now. Really, so I'm again heartened to know that we have representation from at least 3 provinces, and I'm slightly saddened to know that there is no representation of Balochistan and Gilgit-Baltistan. So I would request GATS to make little more hard work next time. All right, so please close up. All right. Okay, so case scenario number 1. A 45 years old male banker comes with history of frequent headaches, which he believes is due to work-related stress. And his blood pressure reading at home, note down, blood pressure reading at home have varied between 130 by 80 and 160 by 100. He is concerned as both of his parents were hypertensive. And in the clinic, his blood pressure reading after 5 minutes of rest checked in both arms is 150 by 90. And his weight is 89 kg. That means he's a little heavy, and his waist is 42, again, little more than the recommended. and height 170 centimeter, and BMI calculated from these values is 30.8. So this is the case. And the question is this patient hypertensive or not? So just for you to recall this case, the case summary comes here: 45 years old male, multiple BP reading exceeding 160 by 100, and you have to decide if this patient should be labeled as hypertensive or not. Paul, please. Every poll will be active for about 10-15 seconds, and you have to give your opinion during that period. We can show the result now, please. Oh, really? I'm happy about 93%, but 7%. Now, I would obviously like to know why 7% people think that this patient is not hypertensive. I personally think that this patient should be labeled as a case of hypertension. Please close the poll. And this is how. So I think the answer is definitely yes, this patient, because he has multiple readings, all readings, at least multiple reading exceeding 160 by 140 by 8 and 90, which is the cut point. And in the clinic, after 5 minutes test, blood pressure in both the arms was more than 140 by 90. So I think this patient is definitely hypertensive. Now, these are the guidelines. So according to the NICE guideline, this is the reference. According to the NICE guideline, anybody who has sitting blood pressure of systolic of 140 or more, or 90, or the diastolic blood pressure of 90 or more. Please note down either of the two. So if somebody has multiple readings of systolic blood pressure more than 140 or diastolic more than 90 is to be labeled as hypertensive. To be normal, you have to have blood pressure of the systolic blood pressure of less than 120 all the time and diastolic less than 180 all the time. Both readings should be within normal limits. In between, there is high normal or borderline hypertension and things like that. And this is the criteria used by American Heart Association and American Cardiology. They put up the limit of 130 to 140 systolic and 80 to 90. So they brought down systolic from 140 to 130 and diastolic from 90 to 80. And the prevalence of hypertension overnight increased from 32 to 46% in America. Now, of course, this is what I was referring to earlier. Depending upon what cut point you use, the prevalence would vary. So I think this is 140 by 90 is generally accepted the cut point. So according to this cut point, this patient should be labeled as hypertensive. And like all other patients, he is in a phase of denial. He would say the blood pressure just rose because I ate this thing, or because I'm a little tense today, because I had a hard day today. But this patient, I think, should be labeled hypertensive, especially when both of his parents were hypertensive. Now, Paul 2, which of the following, suppose everybody agrees that this patient is hypertensive. So which of the following is your preferred choice for him? Lifestyle changes alone or lifestyle changes with pharmacotherapy? Now, this is the summary: 45 years male, treatment naive, blood pressure 140 by 100, BMI 30 by 8, and he has no comorbidity. Your opinion is needed. Let's have the results now. Everybody is not voting. It's only, I think, 28 and 63. At my request to all the participants, we have now 370%, the 370 people. Only about 100 people are voting. Please, I request everyone to poll. But in this case, majority has opted for lifestyle changes with pharmacotherapy. While I understand that point, some people have already spent a lot of time when lifestyle changes alone were recommended. But I think, let me see, please close the poll. No, depending upon, please close the poll, please. Okay. Now, depending upon how motivated and how keen the person is, you could go for lifestyle changes for a limited period, or you could go for lifestyle changes with pharmacotherapy. Now, this would vary from person to person. Now, if you find this person highly motivated and he does not have any comorbidity and he is overweight, lifestyle changes is going to benefit him in other ways also. He is prone to develop dyslipidemia, diabetes. I think if he manages to control his weight, and not only, and if he manages to bring down his blood pressure, that control will not only be acceptable, that control will be actually considered superior. So if your patient is able to adopt lifestyle changes and you don't see any urgency in the treatment, I think patients should be motivated and encouraged to try lifestyle changes. So what are the lifestyle changes? According to, again, NICE guidelines, at the time of diagnosis, if patient has got stage 1 hypertension, like this patient, he has stage 1 hypertension and no comorbidity, like no heart failure, no ischemic heart disease, then lifestyle changes alone should be tried. Of course, you would try only for a limited period. I think 3 months would be a very reasonable period. Lifestyle changes are unlikely to show their results in 2 days or 3 days. And if patient agrees and you also agree with the plan, I think patient should be given about 3 months to try lifestyle changes. If somebody has stage 2 hypertension and has comorbidities, then I think it is wise to start pharmacological therapy. In that situation also, lifestyle changes will remain important. Now, what are the lifestyle changes? Basically, DASH diet. This is a diet which is rich in diet coming from vegetable source and salads and vegetables and vegetable oils and more fiber, less of animal fat, less of animal protein. And so I think that is, and total diet should be reduced. And one should work on one's weight, of course, especially the waist. I think exercises are needed. For that, diet and exercise are needed. So lifestyle changes would show the result if you can demonstrate weight loss. If there is weight loss, then I think you should definitely expect blood pressure reduction. Whether blood pressure comes to the desired level or not, but once lifestyle changes are done and tried, and then we decide whether or not pharmacological therapy is needed. Some exacerbators, somebody is a smoker, somebody has sleep apnea, somebody is taking non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs or steroids or some other drugs, one should review the list of medication patients taking. If any of them is unnecessary and is contributing to blood pressure, that should be reduced. Though of course, sometimes it may not be possible to reduce that medication because the patient may be taking it for some good reason. Now, this is now a reference to the guideline, NICE guideline. It says after initial diagnosis and initial evaluation, if somebody has stage 1 hypertension with no comorbidity, ideally we should start with the lifestyle changes. So whatever the group decided, this patient, I think, although the group, majority of them said, okay, he should be put on pharmacotherapy, I would think that if you go by the book, he should be given a chance to try lifestyle changes. And this is according to guidelines. Now, if patient says that I can't do lifestyle changes, then of course you will start him on medication. Now let's start. What is diagnosis and evaluation? And this is the purpose. The objective of diagnosis and evaluation is to, first of all, establish the diagnosis. We all know one reading is not good enough. Then to rule out secondary cause, we all know it is only in 5 to 10%. And hypertension mediated organ damage, you all know that it would be possible in some who have ignored their blood pressure for a long time. Comorbidities, which will tell us the choice of antihypertensive agent and the urgency of treatment. And we should also determine the overall risk status, because that will set the tempo of the treatment and the follow-up. So these are the objectives. And the tools are, we would take multiple measurements with a standardized apparatus in a patient who is physically, mentally relaxed in a very comfortable, cozy environment. and detailed history, detailed physics examination, basic lab panel, and advanced panel level as appropriate should be done for the initial diagnosis and evaluation. Now we come to the poll 3. Lifestyle changes were tried for 3 months. BP remained approximately 160 by 100. That means no good response. And after counseling, patient is now eager to try medication. Which of the following is your preferred choice to start this patient on? Atenolol 50 milligram once a day, amlodipine 5 milligram once a day, valsartan 80 milligram once a day, and hydrochlorothiazide 25 milligram once a day. So pause, please. This is a summary. 45 years male, multiple BP readings more than 160 by 100, no control, not controlled with lifestyle changes. This time, I think we'll give some more time for people to pause. So I think maybe 10 seconds, 10, 15 seconds. Lifestyle changes were tried for 3 months, but blood pressure remained 160 by 100. And now patient is eager to take medicine because he has accepted his failure. Let's have the results now. Okay, valsartan, majority says valsartan, and all think same number, almost same number says amlodipine is good choice, and some say atenolol, hydrochlorothiazide also. I think it's divided, but majority feel either valsartan or amlodipine. And let's see what NICE says. I think my choice would be to start with valsartan. Of these 4 choices, of course, there are other great choices, but of these 4 choices, I would consider him to put on valsartan 80 milligram. And this is the NICE guideline. This is the actual NICE guideline. So after lifestyle changes, if somebody is less than 55, you all remember this case, he was, I think, 45. And he is non-black, which he is. And the first line therapy is RAS based. A stands for RAS blocker. It could be angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitor, or it could be an NRB. Like, for example, examples of angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, captopril, enalapril, lisinopril, perindopril. It could be any of this, or it could be any of this. ARBs, losartan, valsartan, telmisartan, candesartan, and olmesartan. So we had the choice of valsartan. So I think according to NICE guidelines, this patient should receive any of this, and in the options given, it was valsartan. Okay, why valsartan? Why angiotensin receptor blocker? Why ACE inhibitors are to be considered as first-line antihypertensive agent in younger people? Because angiotensin 2 receptors can produce many effects, and let's examine those effects, and then let's see how these drugs can help. Of course, they can cause water retention and salt retention that can contribute to hypertension. They also cause vasoconstriction. Angiotensin 2 is vasoconstrictor, so they cause vasoconstriction that would contribute to hypertension. And they also cause chronic inflammation and coagulopathy, which may contribute to ultimate atherosclerotic cardiovascular complication. And they also increase cellular growth, which can contribute to left ventricular remodeling and hypertrophy. So these all things are mediated by AT2 receptors, which we will try to block. So if we compare, this can be done with either ACE inhibitors or ARBs. And if we compare both the groups, efficacy-wise, ARBs are non-inferior to ACE inhibitors. Efficacy-wise, I think they are equivalent. And the tolerability-wise, I think most of you would agree, especially our senior faculty would agree, that ARBs are better tolerated because ACE inhibitor can cause irritating dry cough and also occasionally angioedema. So they are equally effective, but ARBs are better tolerated. And now the question is, Are all ARB similar? Not necessarily. So we have some studies. I think since in our case scenario, there was valsartan, I will show you some evidence that valsartan has some advantage. Now, RAS blockade, theoretically, yes, they should give cardiovascular and renal protection, but is there any evidence? Well, there is a lot of it. Now, I'm going to show you the evidence. Of course, time will not allow me to go into the detail, but just a glimpse. These are the studies on hypertension, on heart failure, on vascular health, diabetes and renal, pre-diabetes, ischemic heart disease, coronary heart disease. This is the list of studies on various ACE inhibitors and ARBs. So all ACE inhibitors and all ARBs, they extend cardiovascular protection and renal protection. Now, particularly about valsartan, we have the study value compared with amlodipine in high-risk patients with hypertension. Valsartan group had lesser chances of heart failure, new onset diabetes mellitus, atrial fibrillation, and pedal edema. This is value. And about Valiant, valsartan was non-inferior in efficacy but better in tolerability than captopril in patient after acute myocardial infarction with reduced left ventricular ejection fraction. Further, Valheft, there was a reduction in morbidity and mortality, atrial fibrillation, and hospitalization for heart failure when valsartan was added to standard therapy. And there was greater improvement in the microalbuminuria and conversion to non-albuminuria compared with amlodipine in diabetic patient. Higher dose is better, MARVEL and DROP study. So I think this all indicate that in this case, valsartan of the available choices probably will be the good option. Now, case scenario 1 continued. He was put on valsartan. He was started on valsartan as per NICE guidelines from the available choices. He was started on valsartan 80 milligram once a day, and his blood pressure came down to 135/85. So this is the acceptable limit. 6 months after starting the medication, the dose of valsartan was doubled to 160 as his BP reading started going above 140/90 again. And this is again very, very normal story. Somebody responds to certain dose, but after some time, you need to up titrate the dose. Now he returns for a third follow-up visit after 2 years. In addition to re-emphasizing the importance of lifestyle changes, if patient is put on medication, that does not mean that lifestyle changes are not important. You must re-emphasize the importance of lifestyle changes and adherence to the treatment. Which of the following would be most appropriate for him? Increase the dose of valsartan to 320 milligram from 160, or continue valsartan 160 and add hydrochlorothiazide 12.5 milligram OD, and continue valsartan 160 milligram and add amlodipine 5 milligram, or switch to a completely different treatment plan. The summary is 45 years male, BP not controlled with valsartan 160 milligram, and you have to choose between 3 or 4 options. Paul, please. You would re-emphasize the importance of lifestyle changes and adherence, and his blood pressure is not controlled with 160 valsartan, and you have to add you choose one of the 4 options. Take time, please. I would request everyone, all 355 of you, please, Paul. Let's have the result now. Continue valsartan, and this really is very, very good response. So I think that is what I would do, and that is what NICE says. But somebody has added hydrochlorothiazide. Well, that is also an accepted second option according to European Society of Cardiology and European Society of Hypertension guidelines. So they say that even at the time of diagnosis, patient should be started with 2-drug combo, and 2-drug combo could be one of them has to be RAS based. It could be ACE inhibitors or ARB. And the second could be either amlodipine or could be hydrochlorothiazide. And they have given certain patient profiles where amlodipine will be better and where hydrochlorothiazide will be better. But in this case, both the options are acceptable. And my choice would be adding amlodipine to valsartan because this is what NICE says. So this is what I would do. And this is, I'm bringing you back to the NICE guidelines. NICE says at stage 1, about 30% will be controlled with monotherapy, ACE inhibitor or ARB. And you will increase the dose within that group. And if patient is not at goal in 3 to 6 months, then you have to take second step. And then second step is you would add a calcium channel blocking agents. According to guidelines, this calcium channel blocking agent is amlodipine, right? But I believe other calcium channel blocking agents, especially dihydropyridine derivative, can also serve the purpose, but usually it refers to amlodipine. So in this patient, I think according to the NICE guidelines, if lifestyle and ACE inhibitor or ARB-based therapy fails, then we need to add amlodipine. Combination therapy, why do we need combination therapy? Because majority do not achieve goal BP in Europe with monotherapy. Now, of course, you can expect better education, better adherence, better availability of the drug, better quality drugs in Europe. And still with monotherapy, no matter how much dose you use, you cannot achieve blood pressure control in all the cases. So that justifies combination therapy. And many trials, and this is a list of those trials, which are like treat to target. The aim was to bring blood pressure to a certain level, of course, 140/90 or less. And in all of them, 2 or more agents were needed. So I think this is the basis of the new recommendation by European Society of Cardiology and European Heart Association, which is later adopted by International Society of Hypertension also, that you should mostly start with the 2 agents. So what is the rationale when we, with single agent, it may be ineffective because of the counter-regulatory mechanism. Now, one example is if you use amlodipine, it activates RAS. So some of the blood pressure lowering effect of amlodipine will be cancelled by activation of RAS. So there are other examples also, but I'll just give you one. And poorly tolerated, if you use one agent and take it to the maximum dose, as the effect increases, so does the side effect. So a high dose may not be tolerated. So I think that gives us the rationale of combining 2 drugs, because when we combine 2 drugs, their efficacy is enhanced because of the complementary actions. And like, for example, amlodipine, yes, because the efficacy is enhanced because of the complementary action, and they are better tolerated because side effects may actually be cancelled. The edema produced by amlodipine is reduced by concomitant use of ACE inhibitors or ARBs. This is one example. Now, comparing this combination, why combining amlodipine and valsartan? Valsartan, because of its unique qualitative effects, protection of the endothelium, protection of heart and brain and the kidneys, and also its effect on the blood pressure. But amlodipine, for its sheer potency, it's a very effective blood pressure lowering drug, afferent vasodilatation, but it causes RAS activation, and that is precisely blocked by valsartan. So I think combination works very, very fine. And complementary blood pressure lowering, but cancellation of side effects. Now this is again very interesting study. At any point in this patient, we had the option of increasing valsartan from 160 to 320, or we had the option of adding amlodipine. Okay. Now this is the study. If you double the dose, here, you would have the further blood pressuring effect by 2x. But if you make a combination of 2 drugs must have a complementary action, like valsartan and amlodipine, then blood pressure is by the magnitude 5. So 2.5 times more blood pressure reduction and better tolerability. And as I said earlier, with concomitant use, as compared to amlodipine alone, the chances of edema are reduced. And if you have to use two drugs always, then I think maybe combine them in one pill. And studies have shown that combining two drugs in one pill improves compliance. Now, this is the study where two drugs were given as separate pills here and as one pill here. Look at the adherence, about 80% and about 69%. So if you have to prescribe two drugs, I think it is best to prescribe them in one pill. Now, the case scenario 2. An elderly woman of 73 presents with body pains and aches. I think body pains, aches at this age is very, very common symptom. Now, she denies any other significant symptom. Routine examination reveals following: blood pressure approximately 190 by 110, repeated 3 times over 15 minutes. Readings are almost the same. Heart rate 68, that means she is not exactly having acute anxiety. Respiratory rate 16, weight is 72, and routine labs are done and they are within normal limits. Now, do you think this asymptomatic woman who is 73 years, do you think this lady needs pharmacotherapy? 73 years female, asymptomatic, blood pressure 190 by 110. Pause, please. Okay, let's have the results. Yes, everybody agrees. I think only 9 people think that this 73 years old lady who is asymptomatic, I don't know on what ground they feel that that treatment is not needed, but blood pressure is not borderline high. Blood pressure is very, very high. I think she is very, very prone to develop intracranial hemorrhage, and that is going to devastate her life. So since blood pressure was checked on 3 occasions and blood pressure was very high, I think I would have definitely started her on medication. So I think, yes, treatment should be started. And now the question is, what may be the best starting therapy for this particular patient? Hydrochlorothiazide 25 milligram once a day, atenolol 50 milligram once a day, amlodipine 5 milligram once a day, or losartan 50 milligram once a day. So this is a summary of the case. Please take your time. And again, only 100 people are voting. Getz Pharma, I think only 100 people are participating. You have to look into this matter, though 330 people have joined. I don't know why they're not participating in the polls. I don't really think you need anything other than Zoom. I hope, please get the information from the participant next time if they have any difficulty, if they're not seeing this poll. So what may be the best starting therapy for this patient? This is a question. And let's see the results. Show me the results, please. Okay. So majority feel that amlodipine is a good choice. That is what a NICE recommendation, what NICE says. And those who say hydrochlorothiazide, that may be acceptable choice, especially if you take JNC 8 and the traditional American recommendation. But my choice would be losartan. I think ACE inhibitors and ARBs, they do not work very well in elderly people and Black people. So I think amlodipine should probably be the best option here. So my choice would be amlodipine 5 milligram. You could maybe later on go up to 10 milligram, but starting treatment should never be more than 5 milligram because elderly are very, very vulnerable to the side effects. So this I bring you to the back to the NICE guidelines. Somebody at the diagnosis more than 55 or is black by ethnicity, this patient is more than 55. She's 73. She should be ideally started on amlodipine, and that was the choice of the majority, but not all. So I think others should also follow the NICE guideline. She tolerated the medication well, that is amlodipine 5 milligram, but BP readings remain above the goal. She increased the dose of amlodipine to 10 milligram, but BP is still high. So as per NICE guideline, we have to increase the dose within that group. And which of the following would you now add to amlodipine? Hydrochlorothiazide 25 milligram. She is now taking 10 milligram of amlodipine. Atenolol 50 milligram, methyl dopa, or telmisartan. 73 years female taking amlodipine 10 milligram OD, but BP not controlled. Your choice of all 4 options, what would you do? Let's see the results, please. Oh, really nice. This is very good. I think both options may be okay, but I think hydrochlorothiazide with amlodipine with hydrochlorothiazide, not a great combination, although adding hydrochlorothiazide may ameliorate edema caused by amlodipine. 10 milligram is very likely to cause edema, so that may be rationale. But according to the NICE guidelines, somebody who was started on amlodipine and blood pressure was not controlled, then any drug from ACE inhibitors or ARB should be added, and that is from the available choices, it is the telmisartan. Okay, now this is the guidelines. From this arm, somebody not responded to amlodipine alone, then any of the RAS blockers should be added. Case 2 continued. Telmisartan 20 milligram was added, which was later increased to 40 milligram. And you know, the dose of telmisartan could go up to 80 milligram. So from 20 to, it was increased to 40 milligram. Her current medication consists of amlodipine 10 milligram OD and telmisartan 40 milligram OD. Both are fairly long-acting drugs, and once a day dosing is really okay. So her BP reading is still above 160 by 100 with marked variation. So for her age, do you think 160 by 100 is acceptable, or should we take the next step? Which of the following would you add to her current medication, which is amlodipine 10 milligram, telmisartan 40 milligram, indapamide SR 1.5 milligram, atenolol 50 milligram, methyl dopa 250 milligram, or nifedipine LA 30 milligram OD? Let's see the votes. She is taking 10 milligram, the maximum recommended dose of amlodipine, maximum tolerated dose, I would say, and telmisartan 40, the reasonable dose, and blood pressure is still high. Now you have to choose between indapamide, atenolol, methyl dopa, and nifedipine as a third agent. Because blood pressure is still high, I think that is not acceptable. She still has risk of intracranial hemorrhage. Okay, show the results, please. Again, people are coming on the track. This is again, majority thinks the same way as I do. If RAS blocker and amlodipine combination is not working, the third agent should be a diuretic, and out of all the diuretic, indapamide and chlorthalidone are favored. Although in our country, we have most of hydrochlorothiazide, but we have indapamide. So I think indapamide should be combined. But the problem with indapamide is that you will have to prescribe as a second separate pill. But if you choose hydrochlorothiazide, you can have a triple drug combination. So again, this is a guideline. Whether the patient is taking this route or is coming from this route, if combination of RAS blocker and amlodipine is not working, then you have to add a thiazide type of diuretic. Triple combination, you can see this is the triple combination, amlodipine, valsartan, hydrochlorothiazide. This was much more effective than any two other combinations. So that gives us the rationale of triple drug combination. We are now coming to the end of my presentation. Case scenario 3. A 45 years old man comes with history of hypertension for the last 10 years. And his blood pressure readings are still above 160/100. He is already taking amlodipine 10 milligram once a day, lisinopril 20 milligram once a day, and hydrochlorothiazide 25 milligram once a day. Which of the following is strongly indicated at this stage? So he is taking triple drug regimen and his blood pressure is still 160/100. So the choices are: check for adherence, rule out secondary hypertension, refer to a specialist, all of the above. Because technically, he is a case of resistant hypertension, and Professor Amar Shaukat is going to elaborate on that. So I will not, of course, go into the detail, and he is going to elaborate this scenario, resistant hypertension. Okay. Just few more seconds and then see the result. Just maybe 2 or 3 more seconds. Okay, let's see the results, please. Oh, I think I was expecting full agreement on this. All of the above should be considered. You must check for adherence at all the levels, but before you label him a case of resistant hypertension, you must make sure you check the adherence. And rule out secondary hypertension. Secondary hypertension is more likely to be resistant, so you rule out odd cases like renal artery stenosis or hyperaldosteronism or Cushing disease, things like that. And refer to a specialist. Of course, I think it is always good to consult people who know the stuff better. Okay, so I think all of them should be considered. Now, I think this perhaps is my last or second last slide. According to the patient and his family, he is very punctual on medication, so adherence was ensured. Recently, he underwent an executive checkup and everything is reported normal except left ventricular hypertrophy and diastolic dysfunction. These two are effect of uncontrolled blood pressure. And what medication would you add to his triple antihypertensive therapy? Prazosin, carvedilol, methyldopa, eplerenone, which is a direct renin inhibitor, or any of the above. So this is angiotensin. So this is eplerenone angiotensin. All right. So what do you think would be best choice in this case? Professor Amar Shaukat will tell us definitely better. Let's have the results. Show me the results, please. Shahir, please show me the carvedilol may be a good choice. I think the beta blockers are not present in the first tier of recommendation, but the recommendations say they can be used at any level if there is any compelling indication. In this patient, I don't really think there is any compelling indication. Any of the above would be okay, but I think most of the literature recommend this eplerenone and this angiotensin, no, aldosterone receptor blocker. Sorry, I'm sorry, aldosterone receptor blocker, which is eplerenone. That would perhaps be best choice, but any would be acceptable according to your experience. Any of the above, and so this brings us back to the complete guidelines. This is, I'm not going to go through, so we rebuilt the guidelines of NICE, coming through the different pathways. So beta blocker can be used at any time. So summary, identify and treat hypertension with lifestyle changes and medication. Many patients would be in a state of denial. You have to convince them that something has to be done. Lifestyle changes are better if patient is motivated. They not only work, they can control blood pressure, and the quality of control will be considered superior. If they do not work, then medication. Sometimes we have to start both. individualized treatment plans, but RAS blockers for most and amlodipine for aged and Black people. And according to European Society of Cardiology recommendation, you should start with low dose RAS-based dual therapy. Then get more people to gold with double or triple combination. Just taking a pill is not good enough. One has to be at goal, which is less than 140 by 90. But as I told you, if you can bring it down further, 120 by 80 without side effect, that should be definitely better. So RAS blocker, amlodipine, and thiazide as triple combination, any of the others as fourth, like this mineralocorticoid receptor agonists are preferred, beta blocker at any stage as appropriate, and combo pills improve adherence and outcomes. So thank you very much. And as I always say, I am proud to be part of PSIM as Soumya is, as every member of PSIM is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We are all very proud of PSIM.